Whoa, guys, if that was a foreshock, you might see me right now reporting live from the Cascadia Big One earthquake. I really hope not. I mean, I will report live if it happens, but I really hope it won't happen. But this one, in an area that we just discussed, I think last week or so, or 2 weeks ago, that is a crucial area of the Cascadia fault system, the Explorer plate in the northern area of the Cascadia Fault, where they say this is locked and loaded, and this is the most likely place that could see the rupture, that could see the big one. Cascadia Fault does not have to rupture all through it. It could rupture in segments. So Cascadia Fault goes from Northern California up to Vancouver Island in Canada. So this earthquake there, I was about to go to sleep, I tell you guys, and then I heard beep, the alarm, and I was really like, oh, what is it? I was tired. So I thought it's maybe my security camera that giving an alarm. It did sound like that until I realized this is my earthquake app, that specific app that I have basically adjusted to give me an alarm that is important for my area, right? So 5.6, very interesting area. I recently told you that the Cascadia Fault is breaking apart.
Up until very recently, we thought we understood the earthquake risk here on the West Coast pretty well. You know, numerous small quakes, the occasional damaging shallow one, and the ominous big one. That magnitude 9.0 megathrust we know is coming one day. But new data paints a different picture, one that could rewrite the tsunami and earthquake risk. Scientists have discovered a massive tear underground, a sign that the situation is way more complicated than we thought.
And that some say, oh, it's dying in that area. So first, when you hear this, you think, oh, is this reducing the risk for the earthquake? No, it's not. But there is a slab that is breaking apart from that subduction zone, and that is on the Explorer plate. So is this earthquake a result of that, and can that be a foreshock? Let's discuss this together, guys. I really hope this doesn't turn into a live reporting. So let's have a look at the epicenter of that earthquake. It's basically between the Juan de Fuca Ridge and the Cascadia Fault, right? The Cascadia Fault basically runs parallel to the coastline, west coast of Canada, Washington, and Oregon, a major subduction zone where one plate is subducting underneath the other. And these are the dangerous regions along the Pacific Ring of Fire that can produce these megathrust earthquakes, magnitude 9+ here at the Cascadia Fault. And it's somewhat overdue. That's why we're looking at that so carefully. And what is going on with the Explorer plate? This was just newly discovered. So now we have a magnitude 5.6 earthquake that has just been striking the inside of the most complicated and newly discovered parts of that Cascadia subduction zone. And what a 5.6 can do, we've just seen this in Peru when a 5.5 hit it at night and let buildings collapse, right? This is not that harmless. So, and of course, we're always worried if a quake like this can shake up other locked and loaded areas. So it hit approximately from the location 208 kilometers or 129 miles southwest of Port McNeill, that's Vancouver Island, Canada. First USGS location placed it roughly 10 kilometers or 6.2 miles deep. The reviewed moment tensor solution, the beach ball, is out. Placed the source slightly deeper at approximately 11.5 kilometers or 7.1 miles. That is 37,700 feet beneath the ocean floor. You have to understand that. And this location, I have to say, when I saw it with me, and I'm sure with you too, it immediately raises a very uncomfortable question, especially for the ones that live along the Cascadia Fault, right? So this is the same broad region where scientists recently discovered something mind-blowing, that the northern end of the Cascadia fault is slowly breaking apart. So did this earthquake strike the actual tear? The actual tear where the explorer plate is breaking? Was it movement on a local fault, not the tear? Could it be a foreshock for shizzy hitting the fizzy? And could a magnitude 5.6 earthquake transfer enough stress to trigger the locked Cascadia megathrust? This is what we're always asking when we're seeing these earthquakes in Bend in Oregon that are not at the Cascadia fault but close, right? The possibility is always there. So let's see what the USGS data are telling us. This is the first part of my answer. Let's start with something visible. So this earthquake did not have the movement that is expected from the Cascadia megathrust. So hopefully it's not the Cascadia fault. If we look at the beach ball, the moment tensor shows two extremely steep possible fault planes. So one dips 77 degrees and another one, the other one 86 degrees. So making it both almost vertical. So the movement was overwhelmingly strike-slip, like the San Andreas fault. Cascadia fault is subduction zone, where the stress builds up and then suddenly releases. So strike-slip, meaning two blocks of ocean crust moved mainly sideways past each other. So that is thankfully fundamentally different from the Cascadia megathrust earthquake. So during the big one, the oceanic plate would absolutely suddenly thrust beneath North America, basically along a broad, shallowly dipping contact. So that motion would lift or lower enormous sections of the seafloor and therefore could generate this devastating tsunami that everyone's afraid of. Only 8 to 15 minutes later, it would reach the west coast, up to 100 feet, devastating. So this earthquake that just happened, that kept me from sleeping, happened on a steep fault. That's what the beach ball is telling us. And then it moved sideways. So that tells us it was most likely an earthquake inside that deforming oceanic plate, not the locked Cascadia interface suddenly beginning to rupture. So, but that does not make its location irrelevant. Listen, it may actually reveal why the northern end of the Cascadia fault is so different from the rest of the Cascadia fault that goes down into northern California. Roughly, it's 1,100 kilometers long, or around 680 miles. It's very, very long. Basically touches 3 states in the US and Western Canada. So along most of that boundary, that Cascadia fault, the Juan de Fuca plate is being pushed, subducting beneath North America. So imagine a gigantic conveyor belt disappearing beneath the continent. So the two plates, as you can imagine, they do not slide smoothly. So parts of their boundary are locked and loaded, and the oceanic plate continues pushing. So North America bends and stores strain, and eventually that locked contact can fail. How we have to say it? Hit the fizzy with a magnitude 8 or even a magnitude 9 earthquake. But near Vancouver Island here, the conveyor belt is no longer one clean, continuous sheet. The Juan de Fuca plate transitions into the much smaller Explorer plate. The Explorer plate itself is moving differently. That's the interesting part. It's being squeezed from several directions, and it is subducting much more slowly. So the Juan de Fuca plate moves towards the continent at roughly 4 centimeters. That is about 1.6 inches per year. The Explorer plate moves at approximately half of it, 2 centimeters, or around 0.8 inches per year, with some sections apparently even moving more slowly. And that difference in moving, forces the crust to bend, rotate, and shear instead of moving as one solid block. So scientists recently sent seismic sound waves beneath the ocean. Basically, they made an X-ray of what is going on down there, and what they found was, they were like, what? So the returning echoes that they got produced something similar to an ultrasound of the oceanic crust, or an X-ray. What they found was not merely a crack near the surface. They found major tears cutting through the subducting plate, including one structure, huge, extending approximately 75 kilometers or 47 miles. And across part of that structure, one section of the plates sits approximately 5 kilometers, 3.1 miles lower than the section beside it. So it already fell. You maybe have seen my video about it. It was already falling down 3.1 miles, 16,400 feet. So that does not mean the slab suddenly fell 3.1 miles during like one earthquake. It's a massive geological offset that developed because the plate was bending. As it was bending, being fractured and progressively detached over a very long period of time, right? And some sections of that tear still produce earthquakes because the rocks remain connected and continue grinding one another. Other sections already are almost silent, which the researchers that found it interpret as possible evidence that the plate there maybe has already separated in that area. So the northern end of Cascadia is therefore not breaking in one catastrophic snap. It is being dismantled piece by piece, we can say. So it's creating smaller tectonic blocks while remaining sections continues still to sink beneath North America. They're still subducting. So this earthquake today occurred inside that same broad northern Cascadia Explorer plate system, not directly on the deep tear that dropped by approximately 3.1 miles, right? The epicenter was a little bit farther west from that fault, the Nootka Fault Zone. This is what it's called. So the epicenter was a little farther west on the oceanic side of the system, basically before the plate reaches the main subduction interface beneath Vancouver Island. So I would say the strongest scientifically accurate conclusion is that this magnitude 5.6 probably ruptured a steep local strike-slip fault inside the Explorer plate, or one strand within its larger network of fractures that it has there. It does not line up clearly enough with this main mapped Nootka Fault Zone where the Explorer plate is already sinking 3.1 miles to declare that we can say the Nootka Fault itself ruptured. So the Nootka Fault Zone separates the Explorer plate to the north from the Juan de Fuca plate to the south. It's basically a sideways moving plate boundary that is filled with multiple fault strands and also smaller conjugate fractures. So today's earthquake had the correct general type of movement for this, we have to say, highly shared environment, but we cannot identify, not yet, the exact fault just from the beach ball diagram alone. So I don't want to call a specific fault just yet. That would just be guessing, right? There is already strong evidence that the Explorer plate contains quite a few hidden faults, internal faults that are capable of significant earthquakes. So as this was strike slip, probably no big tsunami is coming. But we had a magnitude 6.4 sequence in 2014 that has revealed a fault approximately 40 miles or 40 kilometers, 25 miles long, a fault inside the subducted Explorer plate north of the Nootka fault zone. So aftershocks were coming as well, and they showed that the plate was basically deforming parallel to the continental margin instead of simply sliding beneath North America. But we also have other earlier earthquakes in the same area that show strike-slip movement. So all that gives us the most likely reason why this 5.6 just occurred. The Explorer plate is being pulled downwards beneath the North American plate while it's still being pushed and shared sideways by this surrounding Juan de Fuca and the Pacific plate. So because different sections are moving at different speeds and directions, the plate must deform internally. So eventually, one of these steep internal fractures could no longer hold the accumulated stress from being pushed around. It breaks. It appears that this is what just happened. Was this a foreshock? Right now, there is no evidence that it was, but you cannot predict this. You only know if it was a foreshock after the next shock, right? After a big shock. Only a small percentage of earthquakes is followed by a larger shock, but Venezuela, 7.2, 39 seconds later, 7.5. That was crazy. So a larger event is never impossible, but most, I have to say, magnitude 5.6 earthquakes are not followed by a big one, thankfully, right? But we have to look at the aftershock pattern that is developing here. If we see aftershocks and earthquakes that are migrating to the east towards the subduction zone, then we have to be on alert again, right? Could this 5.6 trigger the big one? Could it shake up the Cascadia fault where it's locked and loaded and shake it loose? I would say, in the stricted physical sense, every earthquake changes the stress around it. So close to the rupture, parts of neighboring faults can be pushed slightly closer to failure, while others maybe are placed in a temporary stress shadow. So if we have passing seismic waves, they can also briefly disturb other faults much farther away. We know that. It's scientifically proven now for the San Andreas fault that the sideways strands and faults could have a domino effect and actually trigger the big fault. The permanent stress change from this earthquake here, though, I think it would be concentrated near its relatively small rupture. It would not, I don't think so, suddenly load the entire Cascadia megathrust thing that is stretching for hundreds of miles, right? But we know probably the northern section will rupture first because it's locked and loaded. Just as a comparison, a magnitude 9 earthquake releases approximately 126,000 times more energy than a magnitude 5.6. That is crazy, right? So it's not evidence that the big one has started, guys. I hope I can go to sleep peacefully now. But it was a little bit of a shocker to see that earthquake app giving me a warning because I specifically have that one for my area. So thanks for watching, but you have to see something crazy. I mean, if you want to see what a 5.5 did last night in Peru, which is crazy, check out the video here in the end screen. But if you're interested in what they found about the San Andreas fault, it slipped. It did slip beneath California, but it didn't slip loud with a big earthquake, but it moved. And this can change the stress. And what does that mean for the big one? Does that mean Shizzy's close to hit the fizzy? You have to see that. That's crucial. Check it out here. Stay safe, guys. I hope to see you again very, very soon and that nothing, no tsunami and big one will sweep me away. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye. Good night.